Buenas and mananas y todos. Colleagues, good morning. Imina 37 na legislature in Guåhan is back in session. We are continuing our budget session and we are now still in motions. Are there any other motions? And if not, we will proceed to legislative concurrence. There are no items under legislative concurrence, so we will proceed to consent calendar. There are no items under consent calendar either. So we will now proceed to second reading file. On second reading, Senator San Augustine, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask that we move to the Committee of the Whole, and I do have the members for the panel are currently present.
All right, so this is on Bill number 26-37 COR.
Yes, ma'am.
As substituted by the Committee on General Government Operations and Appropriations. All right. We will now take a 1-minute recess to reset the stands, and then we will resume in the Committee of the Whole, chaired by the Chairman of Appropriations, Senator Joe San Augustine. Recess for 1 minute.
The Committee of the Whole is called to order. Materials for the Committee of the Whole are in the shared session Google Drive folder labeled Committee of the Whole. Proposed amendment must be submitted in writing to the clerk via email. Session drive at guamlegislature.org. The rules of engagement. My colleagues, there will be 2 rounds there's a total of 3 rounds. The first 2 rounds for discussion on Chapter 1 relative to the adoption of revenues with the panelists. We will have, on these 2 rounds, each senator will be allotted 10 minutes. Mindful, you have 10 minutes for questions, not including your response. So when you ask a question, the sooner you end your question, the sooner the clock stops. If you are talking and then you pause, the clock continues because the question has not been asked or addressed, okay? So just be mindful of the clock. Colleagues, you may yield your time to another colleague, and your time must be yielded to them prior to them completing their initial time. So it's highly recommended that if you're going to yield your time to another colleague, say it early or before they complete their speaking time. The time you yield is in its entirety. You no longer have the time to speak. Likewise, once your initial time has expired, you may not be yielded additional time. So in other words, when you complete and another colleague starts speaking, you cannot yield time back to the person that already completed. It's over. All right? After completion of the 2 rounds of questions, panelists will be excused. A reminder that amendments will not be entertained after the panel is dismissed. My colleagues, be mindful. If you have an amendment, start getting it in before we get to the 3rd round. 3rd round is for amendments or comments to speak on the chapter of the bill. Again, amendments must be submitted in writing to the clerk at session drive at guamlegislature.org. Amendments not submitted in writing to the clerk and uploaded to the Google Drive folder prior to the start of the chapter or section will be called out of order. Be mindful of that. Amendments will be addressed on a first-come, first-served basis, acknowledged by the timestamp as it is received by the clerk's office. Only amendments received before the start of that chapter will be addressed. There will be no amendments. Once we start the chapter, your amendments must be in already. My colleagues, you had 2 days already to look it over. Yes, Senator Tello.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I appreciate the comments that you're making, but I think that if it's possible, you can send that, what you're reading, to us on the WhatsApp or email so that everybody, if they forget what the rules of engagement is, they can simply look at their paper beside them. Yes, so either you send it to us via email or WhatsApp or whatever, we can get a copy of that. Right. And that way everybody knows the engagement.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Could you also clarify when you said first come, first serve for amendments versus on every chapter, we're also still going to go on rounds, right?
No, it'll be first come, first serve. So in other words, if you submitted an amendment first, we're going to go with you. Then we're going to go to the next person. We're going to go based on first.
But we're also still going to each
chapter.
Have a round of questions for that chapter, right? We normally have a round for every chapter to ask OFB or whoever's here questions.
Well, we have to remember that after we pass chapter 1, the panelists are excused. There's nobody here. It's just us discussing like chapter, I think DOE is chapter 2. Once we get to DOE, there's nobody up here.
OFB's here, yes, OFB.
No, DOE. When we get to the chapter, after the revenue projection, the panelist is gone. There is nobody here. I mean, sure, they're going to be in the building, but...
No, but, so, Mr. Chair, OFB will be here. So, for example, we have questions on DOE's budget. We're going to ask OFB.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we always ask questions on the budget.
He's agreeable to stay. Okay.
Yeah, so everyone will have a round per chapter.
Generally, yeah.
Yeah, is it one round?
We're going to go with the amendments. Once we start, for example, if we start amendments with you, then we'll just continue going around. And we'll give you the opportunity to make your comments also.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, thank you.
Okay? Now, if you submit an amendment to the clerk and replace or amend the amendment later, The timestamp of the replacement will be the amendment's time, next new time of receipt by the clerk. So when you make changes, there's a new time. Okay? Discussion on any amendment will allow the author of the amendment 10 minutes to introduce the amendment and all others 5 minutes. The author of the amendment has 10 minutes. All others have 5 minutes to discuss the proposal. The author will have 5 minutes to close the amendment. The chairman will ask if there are any questions or comments on the section or chapter, and if none, will declare the section or chapter as completed. I will gavel down saying, this page or this chapter is completed, and we'll move on. If a request is made to bookmark a part of the bill, the bookmark section will only be entertained up to the end of that chapter. It is the responsibility of the requesting senator to ensure the bookmark is addressed. Should the discussion or amendments of that chapter be completed, the bookmark is then retired with or without being addressed. I will continue to remind you of a bookmark before we get to the end of the chapter. Senators who wish to increase an appropriation to any agency or department must identify the funding source and provide an explanation of the impacts for both the receiving agency and the defunded agency. After we complete the discussion of the bill, after the whole budget bill has been processed, I will entertain a motion for the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole, followed by a motion to rise from the Committee of the Whole, at which time I will report out the bill as recommended by the Committee of the Whole. We will now begin with Bill 26-37 COR as substituted by the Committee on General Government Operation Appropriation, introduced by the Committee on Rules by request of I Magaʹhågan, Guam, the Governor of Guam, in accordance with the Organic Act of Guam, an act making appropriation for the operation of the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of the Government of Guam for fiscal year ending September 30th, 2024, making other appropriations and establishing miscellaneous and administrative provisions. I now call upon the panel and for the Sergeant-Arms to swear them in for their introduction. Sergeant-Arms, panelists, if you can please rise.
Please raise your right hand. Under penalty of perjury, do you all affirm that any and all information you provide today, whether it be verbally, electronically, and in writing, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
That is.
Mr. Chair, you're under oath. You may proceed.
Thank you, Sergeant-Arms. I would ask the panelists, beginning from my left, which is the OFB, to introduce themselves individually, and then we'll proceed with DOA and moving along with introduction.
Morning, my name is Steve Guerrero, Director of OFB.
Good morning, Llewellyn Terlahi, Chief Fiscal Analyst of OFB.
Vanessa Valencia, OFB.
Good morning, Senators. Edward Byrne, Director of Administration.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Arthur Mariano. I am the Acting Director of the Bureau of Budget and Management Research.
Half a day, I'm Daphne Mansapich-Shimizu. I'm the Director of the Department of Revenue and Taxation.
At this point, I'd ask Steve Guerrero, the Director of Office of Finance and Budget, to begin the discussion on the first chapter.
Mr.
Steve?
Chairman, point of order. I'm requesting a copy of the analysis so we can follow along with DOA and OFB.
You have a copy?
Because I'm sure what we're doing here now is they're going to introduce the
They
budget.
just advised that it's on the shared drive right now.
So you don't want to pass out a hard copy. Mr. Chairman, I think it's going to be much easier for us to follow along.
Let's just
if
get a quick
thank you.
recess so I can communicate with the clerk,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
because they wanted access to the shared drive so they can share it with everyone. All right?
It would be nice if we can get a hard
Yes.
copy as well.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Committee holds back to order. Senator Barnett, you had
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I motion that we recess until 2 p.m. to review the analysis and the documents that we just received.
all right, we will recess till 2 o'clock.